Hey, what's going on, MSU? It's Reverend Marcus again with you, another Sunday message, recapping our Wesley on Wednesday. And I'm going to tell you, if you have not found your way to Wesley on Wednesday, you might be missing out on something that could bless your life. I'm not going to say that it will or it won't. You just got to come and find out. But last week, we really had a good time as we dove into our series, The Bible According to Eli, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Bible. And we dug into Genesis, and we had great small groups, great conversation. And so we want to invite you every single week, 7 p.m. in Olympus 130. That's in the West Campus Annex. We'll have a seat for you. We'll try to make sure there's a seat for you so that we can get into the scriptures in new and refreshing ways. And so I'm not going to spare you. We're going to go right into it. We dug into Genesis chapter 32, verses 22 through 32. And we dealt with Jacob. And I don't know if you know this, but Jacob wrestled with God. I ain't kidding. It's in the text. Jacob wrestled with God. And interesting enough, he was already in between a rock and a hard place because his brother was in pursuit of him. He was afraid of what his brother might do to him. And so he found himself fearing this confrontation with his brother, and he ends up having a confrontation with God. And they wrestled, and so much so that God said, hey man, you're gonna have to let me go. And Jacob says, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And that's exactly what God does. And that's exactly what God did in the text. And that's exactly what God does in our lives. And so that just brings me to my first point, that if we're going to get the blessings, and we're going to get the things that God desires for us to have, we cannot be afraid to wrestle with God. Yep. That's right. I said we cannot be afraid to wrestle with God. And the reason why, because God is not afraid of us, and God is not afraid to get in dirty with us. God is not afraid of our tough questions. God is not afraid of our thoughts, our doubts. God is not afraid of any of those things. And we shouldn't be afraid to engage God with those things, because we see from this text that we read, God is okay with a little tussling so that God can get to us what we need. Brings me to point 2, though. Jacob wrestled with God all night long, almost from night unto day. They said daybreak was coming. That means the sun was about to come up. And so I believe wholeheartedly that if we're going to get the blessings, some of the blessings that God has for us, we can't get them if we're not willing to fight for it. And so that means sometimes your blessings, my blessings are connected to how long we're willing to fight for it. I've heard it said sometimes that anything good is worth fighting for. And sometimes we give up way too easy. Sometimes when things get difficult or things don't go our way, we decide that we're going to give up. And then we declare to ourselves, well, maybe that wasn't God's will for my life. Or sometimes we say, man, God just didn't want me to have it because it wouldn't be this hard if God wanted me to have it. Well, the Bible tells us, or this particular scripture teaches us, that sometimes the blessing that you need is tied to your ability to fight and fight for a long time. But you know what? We found out in the scripture that Jacob wrestled with God so long that God changed his name. He said, you know what? Your name really meant trickster. You was out here scamming people. You was out here doing all these things that you probably shouldn't been doing. And so I'm going to change your name from Jacob to Israel, which means, you strove, or you have striven with God. You wrestled with God. And, the truth about it is, it doesn't really matter what anybody else calls you. It really only matters what God calls you. Yeah, you may have a past that you are running from, things that you've done in your past that you may be ashamed of, some things that you feel like you can never get rid of. You can never be clean from this. You can never be forgiven from this. And I just come to tell you today, really, that is not the truth. Because what God calls you is all that matters. Somebody may call you a liar. Someone may call you a cheater. Someone may call you ugly. Somebody may call you a bunch of things. But it really doesn't matter what they call you. It really just matters what God calls you. So my point to you this Sunday is this, that you shouldn't be afraid to wrestle with God. Because sometimes in your wrestling with God, you get the answers that you want. And in your wrestling with God, you get the blessings that you need. And then lastly, it doesn't matter what other people call you. Read the scriptures. Find out what God calls you. Find out how God feels about you. As a matter of fact, you can't get past Genesis 1 chapter 1, verse 26, before God says humanity is good. And if God, as a matter of fact, God calls you very good. And so don't worry about what other people call you. Worry about what God calls you. Have a blessed day. Peace.